morning, class. Today we're going to be going over the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Some essential questions for today. What is the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and why is the Kansas-Nebraska Act important to the formation of Kansas? But before we begin, we're going to go over the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Last week we talked about the Missouri Compromise just a little bit. So we are going to discuss in your groups what the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was, or anything you can remember from the Missouri Compromise. I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds, and after the 30 seconds is up, we're going to come back together as a group and discuss as a whole class. So at this time, they would be discussing as groups, and then I would come back together and call on each table, and each of them would give me kind of a main point of the Missouri Compromise, but we're just going to pretend like we did that. Thank you for those who shared. The Missouri Compromise. In the Missouri Compromise, Missouri entered the Union as a slave state, and the Northern Territory of Maine entered as a free state. The Missouri Compromise also established an imaginary line north of the 36th parallel, which we can see here in this photo. The 36th parallel runs approximately along the southern border of Missouri. The Missouri Compromise also states that any state to enter the Union above the line would be entered as a free state, and any state to enter the Union below the line would enter as a slave state. Now, this idea is very important for today's lesson, so keep that in mind. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act, who started it? It was proposed by Stephen Douglas, an Illinois senator, in 1854. So why did Douglas propose this bill? Douglas wanted to open up the Nebraska Territory to build a transcontinental railroad. However, like stated in the Missouri Compromise, the Nebraska Territory was above the 36th parallel line, which meant the Nebraska Territory would enter the Union as a free state, and that would upset the balance between free and slave states, because at this time, the amount of free and slave states was perfectly equal. So, what happened? How did Douglas propose to solve this problem? He proposed to split the Nebraska Territory into two sections, Nebraska in the north and Kansas in the south. The Kansas-Nebraska Act also states the idea of popular sovereignty would determine the fate of Kansas. Now, popular sovereignty is the idea that the inhabitants of that territory would get to determine if the territory would become free or slave. So this completely threw out what was established in the Missouri Compromise, which stated, remember, the 36th parallel would determine the free and slave states. So what ended up happening? Bleeding Kansas. Kansas became known as Bleeding Kansas between the period 1854 to 1861. So what it is, it's pretty much a conflict between pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces. After the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, both sides, pro-slavery and anti-slavery sides, rushed to Kansas to try to decide the fate of Kansas. Many important figures actually came out of this Bleeding Kansas period, including John Brown, who was an abolitionist from Ohio. He came to Kansas with his 5 sons and actually fought many wars against the pro-slavery forces. So what ended up happening after this Bleeding Kansas period? The result, Kansas became a free state and entered the Union in January of 1861. Woohoo! So now that you guys know a little bit about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, you guys are going to do a group project in your table groups. So you guys are going to work together. You're all going to receive an iPad, and you're going to be using the GarageBand app and the Keynote app. So what's going to happen, I'm going to click on this link. These are going to be, I'm going to pull up your guys' instructions for this activity. So here are the listed instructions, which you guys will read. But I'm going to share with you this video right here.
The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy.
So you guys are going to be doing that same thing using the GarageBand app and the Keynote app. But instead of pointing out a famous person, you guys are going to draw what you think of when you hear the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and it can be a picture you saw today in the slideshow. And then you're going to write why you think the Kansas-Nebraska Act is important to the formation of Kansas instead of a quote. So I will leave these instructions up here, and I will be walking around